Uh, then there was OpenNebula from Spain. What was interesting here is that Yuka really started from the API, and they wanted to build something which was very a very high fidelity with the API, whereas something like OpenNebula started more from the bottom, where what they wanted to do was really manage virtual machines in the data center. And they worked their way out, but then they didn't start with concentrating on the API. Okay, Yuka was the opposite. They started really with a high fidelity on the API. You got Overt from Red Hat, Ganeti is from Google, and then of course you got OpenStack, and then Apache CloudStack that you guys know, and I guess you're here for CloudStack. If you look at all of them, OpenNebula has an Amazon interface. Yuka, of course, is compatible. OpenStack has made a big fuss in saying that they don't want to be compatible with Amazon because they believe that they need to innovate, on their own, and that following Amazon is not the right thing to do, and so on. I think that's a mistake, but okay. So CloudStack, we have natively in CloudStack, there is an interface in there, AWS API, that gives you an EC2 interface. You install CloudStack management server, and you start the AWS service, and you have an EC2 compatible endpoint. Okay, we're talking about it quite a lot about it these days because we want to improve it and make sure that it's very close to the current Amazon API, and with that we stay up to date with all their API version. Because one of the issues is that they change, their API quite often. So CloudStack, there is a lot of fuss about OpenStack. Of course, we were talking about it, but CloudStack, it's very important to think that, or to remind ourselves that we have, over 300 deployments in the world. That's not people doing POCs, that's people in production with CloudStack. And that's very important. So that's the slide that I just added. Those are just like, a couple that came to mind. British Telecom. British Telecom is the big one, and they just spoke in California at Synergy. And they hosted the London meetup. We were 35 at the London meetup 2 months ago. It was in the BT buildings, and they talked. And they have in production a setup with 16 zones. Okay, so the thing is that we asked them, so how big is your cloud? And their strategy, what they answered was, we're not going for a big cloud like Google. What we want to do is we want to have a very wide coverage. So they're going for zones in multiple countries to have a wide coverage, but each zone is probably fairly small. I don't know how small, they wouldn't say. So, but they have a very wide setup. So BT Green Cloud in Iceland, they claim to be all based on renewable energy. I think they have a great story. They're based on Cloud Platform, of course, the commercial version of CloudStack from Citrix. Ecula in France, PC Extreme, LeaseWeb in Netherlands. For some reason, we have a strong presence in Netherlands. We have several companies in Netherlands that have really embraced CloudStack. Exoscale in Switzerland, those are my buddies. So I do all my demos on Exoscale. Maybe I can give you a demo. DataPipe in the US, SandGuard, you name it. We do have, a lot of guys using Apache CloudStack. So, where do we stand today? And again, with, thinking about clouds and big data, I always keep an eye on the Google Trends, even though we can sometimes make a lot of stories about the Google Trends, but I like this one. You compare cloud computing and big data for Google Trends, and you'll see that cloud computing picked up in 2007. Okay, we know that. It reached its peak in 2011, 2012. Okay, and then since then it's been going down. Okay, big data, that's the red, and you see that big data now, has overtaken cloud computing. So there are more people talking or searching about big data than searching about cloud. Okay, that's interesting. That data is actually kind of validated by the guys from Gartner that do the hype cycle, where technology, you start talking about the technology, that's the technology trigger. It reaches its peak, that's when everybody is excited and wow, this technology is going to save the world. And then people start using it and they're like, well, maybe not, it's not going to save the world. And then you get in the trough of disillusion. and then you start working on it very hard to actually make it productive. So you need to reach the plateau of productivity, okay? So if you look at it, cloud computing, that was in July 2012. So right now, cloud is actually totally in the trough of disillusion, okay? Too bad, tough luck. If you look at big data, it probably moved, so we're at the peak. So right now, big data is really at the peak of expectation. Everybody's like, wow, big data is going to save us. And then everybody is disillusioned about cloud, okay? And that's very strange to me because if we look at the history, big data actually came first. Okay, so big data should be in advance, you know, should be ahead of cloud. So big data should be disillusioned, cloud should be at the peak. Google file system was 2003. Hadoop dates back 2005. Okay, so Hadoop is 9-year-old. You know, Hadoop entered the ASF incubator, Apache Software Incubator in 2006. CloudStack was made a top-level project at the ASF in 2013. Okay, so 7 years after Hadoop. Okay, and now the thing that's happening now, though, is that's very interesting. Is that we have quite a few new big data projects that are joining the Apache Software Foundation, Spark, Mesos, and so on that you may have heard about. Okay. So a few words about the Apache Software Foundation, because CloudStack is a software at the ASF. You know, it's really the leading open source software foundation out there, with the Linux Foundation that's managing the kernel. And when you look at all the projects that you have on there, of course you have HTTP, but you have Spam Assassin, you have all the build tools for Java project, Ant, Maven, and so on. And very interestingly, you have more and more big data projects. Okay, so you have CloudStack, of course, at the ASF, but you have more and more big data projects. So Hadoop is in there, Cassandra, CouchDB, you know, you name it. If you look at all the projects, so in incubation, so when you join the ASF, you first go through the incubation process where you have to show that you can grow a community around your software and that you need to also clean up your licenses and so on. So if you look at the incubator, 30% of the incubator is big data related. If you look at the top level projects, you know, 10 to 15% are cloud and big data related. So, you know, if you think that really open source is leading in terms of cloud computing and big data, the ASF, you know, is really the place to go look for, you know, software solutions for your infrastructure. Interestingly, the entire Hadoop ecosystem is at the Apache Software Foundation. Okay, and there is more and more software coming up online. So here, what I say is really stay on top. Keep an eye on what's going on at the ASF and all the projects that are joining. You got Apache, so Mesos, which is a software from Berkeley. It's a new resource sharing system to basically mix workload in your data center, mix MPI with Hadoop, Hadoop with maybe virtualization or containers and so on. So Mesos is pretty big. Apache Storm for dealing with streams of data. It comes from Twitter. That's how they analyze all their tweets. So the Storm is the Apache Software Foundation. Solar for search. Spark, of course, a very efficient data mining system. Aurora from Twitter, again, to run long-running kind of HA services. All of those are at the ASF, okay, with CloudStack. Make sense? Interesting? So yeah, definitely keep an eye on those. Those are very exciting.